So back in September, I went to Paris with my girlfriend. It was a grand old time. We visited friends, we walked around the city, it was beautiful, it was romantic. So romantic, in fact, that 2 days after we arrived, I proposed. She said yes. This isn't a story about how everything went wrong. Thank God. But this story isn't about what happened on the night I proposed, but what happened the morning after. The next day, my now fiancé and I woke up and decided to go get breakfast in a nice little cafe in the neighborhood. So we walked a couple blocks over and we found a cute little place to have some croissants and a coffee. And that is when it happened. I take a big ass bite of my croissant and I am only focused on how I'm going to destroy my coffee after this, and that is when I hear my fiancé say, "Oh my God, that's Lily Collins." I turn around to look at my left, and sure enough, Lily Collins walks right by us. Literally, she was like right there. She just passed by. And like, what are the chances? Paris is a pretty big city. You don't just run into people. But of all people for me to run into right after I get engaged in Paris, it's Emily in Paris herself. And I'm gonna be honest, right at that moment, I really wanted to walk up to her and ask for a selfie. Because one, I'm a huge fan of Lily Collins, but two, because the prospect of me, of all the people in the world, posting a selfie with Lily Collins on the internet was too funny to me, because what the fuck. But in the end, I didn't do it. She was just walking her dog with her husband. She looked like she was having a chill morning. I didn't want to bother her, so I didn't. After breakfast, my fiancé and I went back to the hotel and I told my mom what just happened, and my mom's only reaction was, "Wow. Yeah, this is probably a sign you should make a video on season 3. Thanks, Mom! Yeah, despite how many times I say I will not be watching the next season of the show, it just seems like I can't quite escape it. And I don't want to disappoint you guys. I saw your DMs, your comments, your emails. Hell, I even saw your tweets, even though I go on Twitter like 3 times a year. I heard you. You guys don't want me to let go of the show. I started this channel with Emily in Paris, and I now understand that with great power comes great responsibility. It took me 2 years, but I have finally accepted that my fate will forever be tied to this show. And you know what? I welcome that fate. It's gonna be like our little yearly tradition. So, a few days ago, I sat down in front of my TV with some chocolate for emotional support, and I watched Emily in Paris Season 3. Let's talk about it. And follow me on Instagram. What? If Emily can be an obnoxious influencer, so can I.
Well, we're still sorting all that out.
Emily in Paris Season 3 starts after Season 2 left us with an incredibly boring cliffhanger regarding Emily's professional life. There isn't much to carry over into this season, because Season 2, while being overly dramatic, is largely uneventful. Nothing really happens in it. The 2 things that are notable, because they have an impact on how this season starts, is that Sylvie left Savoie, and Camille is back with the biggest loser in Paris, who everybody wants to be with for some reason. Aside from that, everything is kind of the same. The characters have not changed. I mean, they're barely even characters, so I guess they can't really change. Character development is not much of a thing in this show, and the story is still in this state of being a complete afterthought. So long story short, Season 3 begins with very little to do. Now, I have always promised that I would be fair when talking about this show. Sitting here and hating on it aimlessly is too easy. I don't want to do that. I go into every season of Emily in Paris determined to give it a fair shot. While I obviously still despise Season 2, I did admit that it improved in some ways, and I stand by that. And like I said earlier, the show did improve in some places. I do commend the writers for actually hearing the criticisms that were given to Season 1 and making a conscious effort to rectify the state of the show. Because all things considered, it's not an easy thing to do. See, Season 2 tries to right the ship without compromising the DNA of the show, if that makes sense. And they did it. They actually managed to do that in a sense, and I think that's worth acknowledging. Clearly, there were a lot of lessons that weren't learned in Season 2, and the show was once again drowned in controversy after they insulted Ukrainians so badly that the government got involved, which was completely baffling given the amount of bad attention they got for their first season's mistakes. You would think they would have understood that the first time around, but no, Darren Star didn't figure that out for himself. Good job, buddy. But despite all of those problems, Netflix ended up renewing the show for 2 more seasons, because Netflix has made it a habit to cancel great TV shows that don't cause a massive amount of controversy in favor of sticking by terrible shows that are insanely problematic and potentially harmful. Who knows why Netflix does anything? And by the way, while we're at it, I will never forgive you for canceling 1899. Now, it's important to note, while I cannot defend their constant renewing of the insulting abomination that was 13 Reasons Why, there is a very specific reason why they keep renewing Emily in Paris. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Anyways, all of that to say, I always try to be as fair as possible with the show. And if I was gonna watch this year, I had to put my biases aside to be fair to this new season and look at how it stands on its own. So, in the spirit of me being as fair as possible, I will say Season 3 of Emily in Paris is the best season of the show so far. Now, don't get me wrong, Emily in Paris is still one of the worst shows to come out in the last decade. It is trash at its apex, yada yada yada. But if I'm comparing Season 3 to its predecessors, then yeah, this season is not that bad. Let me explain. I feel like Season 3 is where Emily in Paris finally becomes what it used to think it was. Just a fluffy, no brain cells necessary kind of show, just like I talked about in my previous video. I swear to God, I wanted nothing more than to make this video and just have fun roasting the dumb characters of the show and their stupid storylines and just overall be like, the show's still bad, but at least it understood, right? It got why we were angry and it actually tried to fix it. Like, that's what I wanted. That's what I expected. I expected to watch this season and just be like, okay, well, the show, it's not problematic anymore. Now it's just bad. And, that's okay. It should be the easiest thing in the world for a show like Emily in Paris to just be a fun, inconsequential, inoffensive, easily digestible romance that just happens to take place in France. It should be the easiest thing, especially after the lesson they got in Season 1. Like, this isn't a show about politics or, any heavy topic that can divide people. Like, there's no message here. It's just empty fluff and aesthetics about a white girl being white in Paris. There is no fucking reason for a show as simple as Emily in Paris to constantly find itself at odds with entire communities. There is no reason for it to continuously offend entire nations to the point where a government gets involved. I mean, for fuck's sake, Darren, it's not rocket science. Now, granted, in this clip, I'm criticizing the show for failing to be something so simple, but it seems like Season 3 finally achieves that. It finally focuses on just being brainless escapism without being insulting to certain communities or cultures, which I'm totally okay with. It's almost like we weren't asking for much. But yeah, credit where credit is due. The show is now the harmless piece of trash TV it always wanted to be, and it made me look at this season much more positively than I did the previous 2. It took them 3 years, but they finally figured it out. That said though, while it managed to shake off one of its fundamental flaws, the show still has a lot of problems the writers don't really know how to fix. And homeboy Darren Star still doesn't seem to be living in the real world, which causes the show to continue its habit of constantly showcasing its brutal lack of self-awareness. And the biggest problem of Emily in Paris is, you know the song by now? Emily herself. Now, last year, it was kind of obvious that it was impossible for the writers to ignore how much people hated Emily as a character. And it was very clear that they did not expect people to hate her so much, so Season 2 took a lot of time acknowledging the fact that Emily is kind of the worst. And they tried to do a lot in those 10 episodes to attempt to fix her. I'm guessing they panicked a little and they tried to right the ship. Unfortunately, it didn't really really work. While season 2 made a very visible effort to make Emily more likable, they accidentally kind of solidified her as being an absolute asshole. Emily really sucks, man. She's self-centered, inconsiderate, excessively entitled. She's a terrible friend. And if you are close to her and you happen to have a boyfriend, yeah, don't trust her. She absolutely will sleep with your boyfriend behind your back. That's just the type of person she is. So, the big question is, does Emily still suck in season 3? Well, if we really take the time to look at, yes, she does. Emily still sucks. Are you surprised by now? I already said it last year. Emily is a terrible character, and I think it is way too late to fix her now. Mainly because it's really obvious that the writers just don't know how to flesh her out. Like, it's very clear they have no real idea what to do with Emily. We are 3 seasons in, and we still don't know anything about her. She's such an empty character. There is so little work done to fully establish her. Like, she never feels like a person. Like, think about it. Emily arrives in Paris in the first episode of the show, and the only thing we know about her is that she had a boyfriend back in Chicago. I'm not kidding. This is the one information we are given about her. And now, 3 seasons later, we don't learn anything more about who she is. Like, what's her story? What's her background? What was her life like before Paris? The show keeps trying to make us feel the stakes around her leaving her life behind and building a new one in Paris. But it's impossible to feel those stakes because we don't know what she left behind. Does she have friends back home? Does she have a family? Are her parents around? Does she have siblings? Like, is there anything for her to miss about her old life? 3 seasons in, we know so little about Emily that, as far as we know, her ex was the one and only person in her life. This show never gave her anything. She doesn't have any real character traits. She doesn't have a backstory. She barely has any storylines. There's nothing really to explore with her character. She's just kind of there. And so obviously people don't like her because as a result of her being written so badly and with so little substance, the only things about her that become noticeable are her flaws. Like I said in season 2, she's a character that is entirely composed of flaws with almost no redeeming qualities. But credit where credit is due, for the first time since the show started, this season attempts to give Emily a character arc, mostly by acknowledging head-on that Emily is kind of a coward. See, a good portion of season 3 is about exploring Emily's complete inability to make decisions. When the season begins, Emily has decided to leave her old job and stay in Paris to work for Sylvie's new marketing agency. The problem is, she never actually quit her old job. She never told her old boss she's working for Sylvie's new agency. And she never told Sylvie that she didn't quit her initial job and is still working for Savoir. And literally, the only reason she did that is because, and hold on to your butts because it's not a joke, Emily wants people to like her. Yeah, there's this whole thing about Emily being a people pleaser, and she's so afraid that somebody might be mad at her for something that she's ready to put herself into the dumbest situations to try and avoid that. Now, obviously, since season 2, the writers have realized that Emily should probably face consequences for her actions every once in a while, because she's a bad person. So at the end of episode 1, it kind of blows up in her face. She gets fired by Sylvie, and her boyfriend breaks up with her. And I was genuinely surprised here because it felt like an actual setup for a true character arc, you know, one that would force Emily to grow as a character, except those consequences are not real. The writers always chicken out of it and they walk things back without Emily learning anything really. She gets back with her boyfriend the very next episode, not by actually growing and making any real stride to prove herself or even by apologizing. No, she gets him back by singing to him.
I believe in love, I'll feel.
Cooper, what have I got to do to get you to stop singing?
And also, she gets her job back for no real reason a couple episodes after that. You think this whole storyline is very much about her learning that making difficult decisions is a part of life and that she has to grow the fuck up and respect people enough to make choices because her actions affect people, which is something she desperately needs to realize. But no, the storyline is set up, but it doesn't really go anywhere, which sucks because it would have been a solid theme for this character. The phrase they use in the show is "not choosing is still choosing," and it's very much an effective way to describe Emily's actions. Every time Emily is faced with a dilemma in her life that requires her to make a choice between two clear options, she systematically decides to deal with it by not dealing with it. She systematically chooses to not make a choice. Oh, Emily is interested in two different men and she doesn't know who to pick? Well, then she just sleeps with both of them and doesn't care if she hurts them in the process. Or rather, she does care, but only when she gets caught. Oh, Emily is interested in a man that also happens to be her best friend's boyfriend, and she has to choose whether she wants to keep her friend and let go of the guy or pursue the guy and lose a friend. Well, no worries, she's gonna do it the Emily way, meaning she just decides to sleep with her best friend's boyfriend and lie about it, and then proceed to act clueless when said best friend is in distress because she can tell something is wrong with her man, and pretend to be there for her and be a shoulder to cry on. Oh, Emily has to pick between two jobs? Nope. She's just gonna work for both places at the same time and lie to both her bosses because she doesn't want anybody to dislike her. At the end of the day, Emily is just incredibly selfish and she always tries to have it both ways because she's too much of a coward to actually make real decisions. And that's where her pseudo character arc just falls apart because by the end of the season, she hasn't learned anything. One of the storylines this season is about Emily finding out that Camille is having an affair. She's cheating on Gabrielle with a woman she works with. When she discovers that, Emily is left with a choice. She can either confront Camille, her best friend, or tell Gabrielle, also one of her best friends. But instead, she decides to do nothing. She keeps talking about having to do something, but she can't bring herself to make a choice. Gabriel can tell his relationship with Camille is going to shit and he doesn't understand why she's so distant, but Emily still remains silent. When Camille proposes to Gabriel later in the season, Emily still remains silent. And because that clear arc was established for Emily, you would think that this is all leading up to her deciding she doesn't want to be a coward about this, and that it would end with her finally deciding to be a good friend with integrity as she makes a difficult decision. But no, that storyline doesn't actually lead to anything. It just sort of disappears over time, and Emily's character arc is largely forgotten and left unattended as the season progresses. It doesn't actually have a resolution. It's like the writers just forgot that's the direction they were taking with her. So, in the end, season 3 is just same old with Emily. She's still annoying, she's still obnoxious, she's still a terrible friend with very questionable morals, and she's still impossibly self-centered and indecisive. She's never a character you end up liking, you just kinda get used to her. Lily Collins keeps saying that she admires Emily because she is, quote, unapologetically herself. But girl, this might be my unpopular opinion of the week, but unapologetically being yourself is not admirable if it means being a bad person. Emily still sucks. She's also still terrible at her job. But for some reason, this season really tries to convince you she's actually good at it, but I don't think the writers realize that the way they go about doing that makes her seem even worse. In my video about season 1, I pointed out that Emily was bad at her job, and I said the little amount of good she manages to accomplish at work was mostly by accident or by complete luck. Like, she never gets a huge win at work because she's competent, she just lucks out every time. And it's still true in season 3, but the writers are kind of being hypocrites about it now. The show really wants you to believe Emily is this hyper-competent problem solver who is unbeatable in her field, and everybody thinks she's amazing, but I'm sorry, that's just not true. Emily is not a problem solver. She never actually solves anything. She's just lucky. Every single time a problem is set up in the show, it is immediately followed by Emily being given the solution to that problem out of nowhere. Now, this sounds vague, but let me give you a few examples of what I mean. In episode 6, Sylvie is organizing a huge exclusive event for a brand at an iconic venue. Except, the week of the event, the venue unexpectedly cancels. So the team has to find a replacement, and everyone is upset because it is basically impossible to do that in just a couple days. Sylvie comes into the office to explain the issue, and as soon as she finishes explaining it, like literally the conversation is not even over yet, Emily gets a text from her boyfriend conveniently showing her photos of a castle owned by his boss, which happens to be the perfect venue for the very event they are in the middle of discussing.
With a week's notice, we'd be lucky to get a dog track.
And that right there is exactly what I'm talking about. That's the pattern. Emily is presented with a very specific problem, and less than a second later, a perfect solution tailored to that exact problem falls from the sky to land into her hands so she can save the day. And the solution is so perfect that it's unintentionally comedic. In this particular scene, it turns out that the castle Emily was just presented with has a garden full of lavender, which conveniently happens to be the exact color of the product they're going to promote. Because obviously it is. And that phenomenon just keeps happening. Later in that same episode, Emily's boyfriend Alfie has a massive incident at work and his boss is really upset about it and he doesn't know what to do to fix it. Alfie is stressed out, so he explains the problem to Emily, and I'm not kidding, less than 1 minute after he tells her, Emily randomly meets a man who, in the context of an unrelated conversation, happens to conveniently give her a literal step-by-step guide on how to salvage the exact specific situation Alfie is currently dealing with at work. So she goes back to Alfie and his boss Antoine, and once again, she saves the day. Earlier in the season, Sylvie loses a large number of clients due to the chaos of her rebuilding a company from scratch. And she tells Emily that she needs her to find a big client with massive operations to give credibility to their new marketing firm. And Emily immediately has the solution for her because right before entering the building, just 45 seconds prior, she got a random call from her ex-boyfriend in Chicago, who she had not spoken to since season 1, and he told her that he was just hired as a big shot marketing manager for McDonald's. And not only that, but very conveniently, McDonald's is currently looking for a marketing firm in France to launch a new product. And the person in charge of that project will be in Paris the next day.
Oh, well, isn't that convenient?
So Emily just found herself with the gigantic McDonald's account perfectly set up in the palm of her hand less than 1 minute before she's asked to find a big client.
I may be an idiot, but I'm not stupid.
In episode 5, Sylvie wants to bring prestige to the new firm by being integrated in a super duper mega exclusive list of influential and inspirational entrepreneurs in Paris that is curated by a woman named Janine who is known for having excessively high standards. Like, it's pretty much impossible to get on that list, and it's impossible to get an interview with Janine. She's like too exclusive even for the elite of Paris. But guess what? As soon as that conundrum is presented to Emily, she realizes that this very super elite, exclusive, God mode important woman who is coveted by all of the elite of Paris just happens to follow her on Instagram. How lucky! So she can once again come to the rescue by getting Sylvie an unattainable interview with Janine with a simple DM. You get the gist. Emily never actually figures a way out of things. She's not competent, she just gets lucky all the time. And if it's not luck, it's an accident. And if it's not an accident, she only ever manages to succeed at work because she literally hijacks her coworkers' clients to build on previously established ideas that weren't hers, and then takes all the credit for the success of her peers once it's all said and done. This season even has Julien getting fed up with Emily stealing his clients, to the point where he jumps ship at the end of the season, and the writers set up a storyline where he's probably going to start working for one of Sylvie's rivals. Emily is not really improved this season, she's just slightly watered down. She's trying to keep her head down, she doesn't cause trouble as obnoxiously as previous seasons, but she's also not a particularly better person. The season does show that her French supposedly has gotten better, but it's not really a thing. Like, other characters say she's gotten better a lot, and Emily can now formulate a couple sentences in French, but she only does it a couple times the entire season. She still speaks English to everyone all the time, and the show is still doing this thing where even if a room is entirely filled with French people, if Emily is in the room, then everybody speaks English. So it's still very much the same problem of everyone having to adapt to Emily rather than Emily having to adapt to everybody else. So the writers really want to convince you that things have changed with Emily, but if you actually stop 1 second to think about it, everything is kind of the same. But the main reason why Emily is more stomachable this season, despite the fact that she still sucks, is simply that Emily is not really the main character of Emily in Paris Season 3. The main character is Sylvie. This season gives Sylvie a much bigger role. Plot-wise, it's more about her reconquering her business than it is about Emily and whatever bullshit she's up to. Sylvie is infinitely more fleshed out as a character this season alone than Emily is in the entire show. We still don't really know anything about Emily, but we learn so much about Sylvie this season. A lot of her motivations are brought to the table. We learn the intricacies of her very nuanced personality and her difficult relationships. Like, a huge portion of this season is dedicated to Sylvie realizing she actually wants to work on her marriage and make it work. We get to see a more affectionate part of her, not only towards her husband, but also towards the people she works with. She's protective of them, she cares about them, and she values her friendships quite a lot. Like, it's kind of surprising, but this season, Sylvie turns out to be a genuinely layered character with some qualities and some flaws. We see a more vulnerable side of her, but also a darker, more mean-spirited side of her. There's particularly an episode where we see how manipulative she can get in order to get what she wants, and overall, we just get to see how complex of a person she is. And it makes her journey through the season actually sort of compelling. It's almost like Sylvie is the fan favorite character because it's the only one they ever bothered to flesh out. Who would have thought? I genuinely think the writers just realized what they had with Sylvie and decided to give her a bigger role and actually put some effort in her character, which is a first for this show, and it pays off. Sylvie even gets to be the character subjected to the show's very first attempt at subtlety. It takes place during a business lunch she has with a man she's known for a very long time. She has to make a deal with him for work, and they have a very tense conversation during which it is heavily implied by Sylvie that she was sexually assaulted by this man when she was still very young.
Je me souviens de toi quand tu n'étais qu'une assistante.
Oui, moi aussi, je me souviens très bien de vous quand j'étais une assistante. Je me souviens de tout.
I'm not gonna lie, that scene genuinely has some level of weight. Like, I felt that. As always, Philippine Leroy-Beaulieu is still incredible in this role. She's way too good for this show, and she nails that delivery, but they did it? I feel weird saying it, but 3 seasons in, we have the first genuinely good scene in Emily in Paris. Well, fuck me, I guess everything is possible. It's the only good scene in the season, which also means it's the only good scene in the entire show, but a win is a win. I'll take it. You gotta improve at your pace. But yeah, long story short, this season would not be as tolerable if it weren't for Sylvie. She eclipses every other character so easily, it's almost unfair. Philippine's presence is literally carrying this show, and I love that she feels more like the main character than Emily does in her own show. She's layered, she's complex, she's so much more charismatic. I'm still lobbying for a Sylvie spin-off with better writers. I love her, she's my homie, #Sylvie did nothing wrong. As for the rest of the cast, pretty much falls under the business as usual category this season. Same but different, but still same. Mindy feels a bit more like a real character this season, rather than just being Emily's bigoted sidekick who never gets a storyline. She still doesn't really have a reason to exist in this show, aside from the fact that the writers decided that something Emily in Paris absolutely needs as a show is a Mindy musical number in every single episode. And I gotta say, since that season 1 sequence that I clowned on in my very first video when she was singing La Vie en Rose, it has not gotten less cringe. I don't know what it is with 2022 TV and having characters randomly do a musical number on Don't Start Now by Dua Lipa, but sis, let's leave that in 2022, okay? We don't need this. This show still does not deserve Ashley Park, and I am still waiting for her to leave this show so she can do better things, because she is really talented and I love her and she's a queen, and yeah, let's move on. Gabriel is kind of a ghost this season. Not that he's not in it, he is, but just like most of the cast, he's just kind of there. I think the writers realized that he was just the worst in previous seasons, and so they decided to kind of reel him back in a little. So this season, he's pretty chill. He's just doing his thing. He's still a bit of a whiny man baby who just complains all the time. Like, he never really had a true storyline in this show. I mean, aside from complaining. And season 3 is not really different.
How to lose a guy in 10 days. I feel like that's what she's trying to do to me. I mean, who are those guys? They're hating on her.
Are you dreaming?
Actually, yes. I'm dreaming big.
I love you both. And I'm gonna end up with nothing.
I mean, let's all be honest here. Gabriel is really just in this show to stand around and look pretty, which, good for him. Just like Emily, we still don't really know anything about him aside from the fact that he's a chef. He doesn't seem to have any friends aside from Emily and Alfie. Like, he literally gets engaged and married this season, and he had no friends showing up. He also doesn't seem to have parents or siblings, like they're never mentioned. We do meet his grandmother this season very briefly, although I'm not sure what the point of that character was. Her one personality trait during her entire time on the show is just hating Camille, which I guess could be interesting, but there's never an established reason why she hates Camille. It's never really discussed. There's no confrontation that would justify that being a thing in the first place. We just meet Gabrielle's grandma, and she's just being a bitch to Camille all the time. And that's it. It's never explained. All of her scenes are just random small talk where she makes it very clear that she doesn't like Camille. Wow, riveting. Oh, and speaking of Camille, I'm not sure when the writers decided they wanted Camille to be the villain of this show, but boy, did they succeed. They managed to make one of the 2 likable characters of the first season the most despicable of them all. They'd already started making weird decisions with that character in season 2, weird decisions that largely came out of nowhere, but holy fuck, they completely ruined her in season 3. Her storyline this season makes no sense. It's so incoherent, it's almost funny. Camille's entire story in season 3 is centered around her having an affair. After she spent last season talking down to Gabriel and Emily for their cheating, she becomes the biggest hypocrite in the world because right after getting back with Gabriel, she cheats on him with a woman she works with at the gallery. An artist from Greece, I think, who has a crush on her. Oh, and by the way, the writers of Emily in Paris Paris are so bad at writing flirting or general romantic dynamics, and all the sequences where these two are flirting with each other are just weird. They're trying to make it like sexy and playful and tense, but it comes across insanely creepy.
It's definitely not my type. Yep. I'm much more into smart French women with exquisite taste.
Tell me that wasn't right out of a horror movie. I would be terrified. That sounded more like a threat than anything else.
I'm much more into smart French women with exquisite taste. Let's talk more later.
But yeah, Camille's new shtick is that she's a cheater and she's an asshole to everybody. I mean, to be fair, she has been done dirty in universe, so her turning into a spiteful dickhead kinda makes sense, but I'm not sure the writers fully intended on her coming across as that big of an asshole. And it's jarring because, weirdly enough, Camille is barely present this season. Like, for everything she does, she has a surprisingly small amount of screen time. And the little of it she has paints her in the worst possible light because she's either doing horrible things or she's just kind of there and she's not doing anything. She only has 1 or 2 scenes and very few lines in most episodes. And in episode 7 and 8, she doesn't appear at all. She's just not there. She comes back in episode 9 to give that big pivotal moment where she proposes to Gabrielle despite being in the middle of having an affair. And that is where her character takes a completely random turn that officially makes her the worst. The writers came out with a twist that was so ridiculous and out of left field that it honestly got me confused a little bit. So in the final episode of the season, Gabrielle and Camille get married. But in the middle of the ceremony, Camille suddenly changes her mind out of nowhere, and she suddenly says she can't marry Gabrielle because she knows he's in love with Emily, and she starts going on a whole rant where she says she made a pact with Emily and they promised neither of them would ever date Gabrielle, and she broke that promise and got back with Gabrielle behind Emily's back, which, okay, all of that happened in season 2, but again, out of nowhere, she just randomly reveals that she got back with Gabrielle not because she loved him and wanted to be with him, but because she didn't want to lose to Emily. Excuse me? Pardon? ¿Qué acabas de decir? I'm sorry, but this is literal character assassination. This goes against everything Camille's arc has been in this entire show, and it makes no sense. This is literally the opposite of everything her character has been about. All she's ever wanted was to be with Gabrielle. Like, it completely changes her character in a way that is completely incoherent, and that 180 is not earned one bit. The writers literally ruin her character because they're way too hellbent on making Emily and Gabrielle happen, even though they suck and they're just not a good pairing. Oh, and just to make things better, the big cliffhanger of this season is that Camille is pregnant. Because yeah, it wouldn't be a trash TV show without the infamous season finale pregnancy twist. Oh, because yeah, that's how the season ends, by the way. With a complete 180 from one character that comes out of nowhere for the sake of forced drama, and in the middle of a conversation between Emily and Gabrielle admitting they still have feelings for each other, but Camille is pregnant. It doesn't really feel like a season finale. Like, it feels like the season ends in the middle of an episode, which is weird, but yeah. The point is, Camille as a character is completely ruined. But where Camille becomes the most despicable character in the show, against all odds, Alfie has become one of the more likable ones. In season 2, he was kind of a cynical asshole, which honestly, man, same. Oh my god, twinsies. But this season, he's way more chill and they managed to make him a pretty cool guy. He's still kind of whiny, but he's sweet and easygoing, but he can still hold his own when conflicts arise. Yeah, because this season has a very weird thing with male characters getting super possessive and territorial with their love interests. It's honestly kind of weird. There are some unintentionally hilarious scenes where, like, a woman will introduce a male friend of hers to her boyfriend and things instantly get super confrontational for no reason. It's weird. It's really weird.
Oh, and this is Nicola. He's a friend from boarding school.
Boarding school. Le Rosé, in Switzerland.
Well, where else?
This is my boyfriend, Alfie.
Timothy, how's it going, mate?
Boyfriend? Since when? She's never mentioned you, bro.
Like, bro. Chill. But yeah, overall, there isn't much to say about him, but Alfie is fine. Whatever. Luc and Julien are still not doing much in this show. Julien finally becomes relevant to the thin, non-existent story of this fucking show in the last, like, 2 episodes, when he starts getting seriously angry about Emily constantly stealing his clients away from him. Luc, however, is still kind of pointless, but at least he's no longer just a weird, perverted creep constantly making sex jokes, so I'll take the win. He has his moments this season, whatever. Overall, the characters are still far from being a strength in this show, but just like Emily, you just sort of get used to them after a while. And at least, they're no longer as incredibly annoying as the writing. Now yes, the show has gotten better, but it would be insane to say that it doesn't still suffer from an extreme lack of self-awareness. Emily in Paris is still so dumb and still boring as fuck. Oh my god. This show doesn't know what to do for like 75% of its runtime. There are entire episodes composed from start to finish of an endless series of scenes where people are just having random small talk. Nothing has a point, no one is doing anything, nothing of importance is happening, it's just people having small talk. And those scenes can go on forever.
I woke up alone this morning again. Have you moved into Alfie's hotel?
No, but I'm starting to get that look from the hotel staff. Every bonjour they say is so loaded.
Okay, so we've got the catacombs, nice. Musée Carnavale, interesting. Theodora the orangutan.
Oh yeah, she's very famous.
He expects all of his children to work at the company. But it does have its perks, though. 2 weeks ago, I was on a company retreat in Fiji.
Oh, how nice. Well, 2 weeks ago, I was busking in the metro.
As the Ferris wheel turns. I wonder how many people are having sex on it as we speak.
Excuse me?
Everyone does it.
Marketing package.
See, très influential. She's really good at what she does.
Oh, stop. Now I'm the one blushing.
We went to boarding school together in Switzerland. Le Rosé.
Mindy was this very naughty girl, a couple years younger, who used to sell weed out of a dorm room.
Stop, you were the naughty one.
Nah, it
Yeah,
was
no,
you.
stop.
But that's not even the dumb part. There are moments in this show where I truly wonder how these people come up with some of their ideas. That writer's room has to be one of the most unhinged places in Hollywood. Like, I feel like they only have 10 minutes to come up with stories, so they just show up between lunch and the next meeting and they just come up with something in 5 minutes and write it on a board and just go with it. So self-awareness is something that just does not exist in this show. For example, this season weirdly tries to romanticize being unemployed. At the end of episode 3, Emily decides to stay in Paris and quit her job with Kate Walsh, but she was fired from Sylvie's new firm. So she is now alone in Paris and she has no job. I stupidly thought this would lead to a storyline about Emily really getting her shit together and realizing how privileged and entitled she is. But I forgot this show is made by Darren Star, so no. Instead, we follow Emily as she enjoys being jobless. And she makes being unemployed like her quirky little venture of the week.
Bonjour, it's Emily in Paris. Today is day 1 of fun employment. I want to know where and what you guys want to see.
They make it look like it's amazing. She's living her best life. She's spending a whole lot of money. She has a, quote, unemployment bucket list. She's running around Paris, going from restaurant to restaurant. She's live streaming her entire days to her Instagram followers. She's not worried about her financial stability. She's not even looking for a new job. Like, let me just remind you that by that point in the show, Emily has not even been in Paris for a full year. In fact, we know she's only been here for about 9 months because the reason why she was sent to Paris in the first place is because her boss Madeline found out she was pregnant and couldn't go herself, so she sent Emily as a replacement. But it's only in the first episode of season 3 that Emily's boss gives birth, which means the entirety of the show up till that point took place during her pregnancy. So for her to be like celebrating her unemployment via this quirky little romanticized montage is just so weird to me. Like, she should be scared shitless right now. Emily is now unemployed and lives in an insanely expensive city without a visa, where she has to find a job knowing full well that she doesn't speak the language. But she acts like being unemployed is just a fun little vacation. Ugh, man. Emily in Paris and its blatant lack of self-awareness is something that will forever impress me. Like, seriously, imagine trying to romanticize unemployment. You're really surpassing yourself, Darren. But remember what we said. When Emily is presented with a problem, the universe immediately drops a perfect solution on her head. Emily starts episode 4 unemployed. She finds it really fun. But before the episode even ends, without her doing anything, Sylvie comes out of nowhere to offer her job back. So once again, Emily is validated for her bullshit, even rewarded for it, and she never faces any real consequences for her actions. Why do I keep doing this to myself? Now, here's the thing. I'm pretty sure that for the first 2 seasons, I was too focused on the show's problematic antics to actually see why this show even exists. This sounds weird said like this, but hear me out. What I mean by that is, while Emily in Paris is a popular show, it is far from being Netflix's biggest. It's not Squid Game or Stranger Things or Wednesday, like Casa de Papel, Bridgerton, Sex Education, or even You, which is not as big. Like, in terms of numbers, Emily in Paris never even came close to reaching this popularity level. So I didn't quite understand why Netflix was so hell-bent on sticking by this show that, up till now, only served to put them under fire, tarnish their reputation, and even have people look into them for potential corruption. And let's not forget that this show got the Ukrainian government on their ass. Like, realistically, Emily in Paris has been an absolute PR nightmare for Netflix since its very first day on the platform. And they've cancelled shows that were infinitely more popular for less than that. So why stick by it so vehemently? What is it about Emily in Paris that makes it so valuable to Netflix? I just didn't understand that. But in season 3, it finally clicked. It's not until season 3 that I figured it out. And again, I must have been blinded by all the other bullshit the show is up to, because I'm kind of embarrassed I didn't think about it sooner. See, the reason why Netflix will protect Emily in Paris at all costs, to the point of destroying its own reputation in the process, is not because they think the show is great or because they believe in it. No, we're very far from that. The real answer is advertising. Emily in Paris as a show is a goldmine for Netflix because this show is just one giant excuse for advertising money. That is the only reason why this show still stands today, because they use it to advertise for major companies. And they're completely shameless about it, by the way. It is so blatant, it's almost embarrassing. And season 3 is so in your face about it that I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. I sort of touched on it briefly earlier, but the first episode of Emily in Paris season 3 is really cringe. Yes, because of the dialogue, the dumb plot, the characters, etc., etc., but above all, it's cringe because this entire episode is just one giant ad for McDonald's. And oh my god, shameless is not enough of a word to describe it. It is so uncomfortable to watch. And I'm not gonna dwell on it too much because people have already made fun of it enough online in the past couple weeks, but I just want you to see this.
Have you ever been to a McDonald's in Paris?
No? Why?
Let me take you to lunch.
Get this. McDonald's is looking for a marketing agency in France to launch the McBaguette.
That sounds like a huge account.
It's epic. Huge payday.
I can't believe a French chef is a regular at McDonald's.
It's what we call un petit plaisir.
A little
Treat.
or a luxury.
And the good news is the French are already quite fond of McDonald's.
Yeah, they think of it as a little luxury.
I thought I said no eating in the apartment and no to this client.
I know, but I didn't want you to make a mistake before considering the product. Think of it as a petit plaisir, a little luxury. McMarvelous, McParadise.
McBaguette.
Exactement.
Well, I gotta say, I'm loving it. And we are loving it too.
Yeah. I was cringing in my seat the whole time, especially when I realized that this was just the first episode, and it keeps going. There's an entire episode that is just a long ad for McLaren. Another one is dedicated to Air France, then Ami Paris, and so on and so on. It even advertises a weekly magazine named M by Le Monde, and throughout the whole show, it's insane. Chanel, Chopard Jewelry, Courrèges, Rimowa, Perrier, Carrel, it never ends. There's a French financial magazine named Les Echos that referred to Emily in Paris as the #1 destination for advertisers. Companies are willing to pay a fuckload of money to get a product placement on the show, which admittedly makes sense. The show is literally about a bunch of characters who work in marketing, and more specifically, marketing for luxury brands. So even if a regular-ass company like McDonald's or Perrier appears on the show, it's gonna be under the guise of it being worthy of being a luxury brand. So it's literally securing themselves a pop culture win. This show is a gold mine for advertisers because it was literally designed for that. And that's the big thing. That is the true chamber of secrets of Emily in Paris. That is why this show is still around despite everything that happened. This show can do whatever the fuck it wants. Netflix will not get rid of it. No matter the amount of controversy, the amount of hits their reputation has to take, it doesn't matter. This show could have the entire world coming after it. They will not cancel it. They don't even care if it's good, honestly. I mean, clearly they never did. But even if the show gets worse and becomes even more problematic, Netflix doesn't give a fuck because McDonald's wants to give them money. That is why when everything went down last year after season 2 and people got really angry and the Ukrainian government got angry and it looked like the sky was falling on Netflix's head, their first course of action wasn't to address the controversy. It wasn't to address the problematic aspects of the show. They never even apologized for the show's bigotry. No, their first course of action when being in the middle of that nightmare was to renew the show for 2 more seasons. And that's it. I guess that's the extent of it. Not much else to say here. Look, I talked about it last year, but I'll repeat it. I never asked or hoped for Emily in Paris to be cancelled. I only ever asked for it to be better. And while it is very much still a bad show by all definitions, it did get better. It did improve. Like I said at the beginning, if I'm being completely fair, yes, this is the best season of the show so far. It still sucks ass and it's still unbelievably boring, but it has been going in the right direction. I mean, come on, it has one good scene now. One! I don't know if you know, but they made 30 episodes of this shit, and it has one good scene now. That has to count for something. They finally got something right. I mean, I think. I don't know. Man, talking about this show just kills my brain cells. But yeah, I gotta be fair here. I said in my previous video that all this show ever had to be was a dumb, brainless piece of fluff about an American idiot in Paris. You know, without having to insult cultures and communities left and right. Like, the best thing this show can be is some trash TV we can at least enjoy laughing at. And if I'm being completely honest, they did that. Emily in Paris is now just stupid, brainless, inoffensive escapism, and I'm totally fine with it being just that. Is it a good show? No. Is it ever gonna be? Nope. But at least this season, I'm not mad at it. It learned its lesson, and while this show only exists for Netflix to make some ad money, I do see why some people love to turn their brains off and enjoy the stupidity. And to be clear, it's not like I'm above dumb escapism. I would like to remind you guys that I like most of the Fast and Furious movies. This shit is stupid. It's some of the most brainless entertainment I've ever seen, but it's so fun. Except for Fast 9. Genuinely one of the worst movies I've seen in the past few years. My friends literally had to convince me not to walk out of the theater before the end. I also love Gossip Girl and Pretty Little Liars. and Teen Wolf? This shit is stupid. And if that's not enough for you, recently my fiance and Khadija Mbo introduced me to Too Hot to Handle, and my fiance somehow convinced me to watch it with her. And this thing was so unbelievably dumb that I found myself actually having fun watching it because we were just laughing at everyone the whole time. These people are from another planet. So yeah, I'm not above it. Emily in Paris is trash, but I see what some people see in it. I mean, I have gotten weird angry DMs from people actually trying to argue that this show is for real the greatest TV show of all time, and these people are just insane, but it's their problem, not mine. So I'm gonna end this video with a slight rework of the phrase I use to end every single one of my Emily in Paris videos. Go find a better show to watch. You're better than this, but also I understand if you want to watch it anyway. And besides, no matter how bad it gets, it'll never be worse than this one. But that is for another video.